Everyone, it's Evelyn, and in this week's video we're going to go over the top 10 dahlias in my cut flower garden that performed the best in a heat wave. Now, I'd actually hoped to film this on my deck because I haven't been out on the deck this year. Last year I did a lot of my filming on the deck, and it's nice with the backdrop of Georgia Strait behind me, or as some people know, the Inner Passage. But unfortunately it's drizzling today, so we're in my office. Now, one of the reasons for me why it's really important to know which dahlias do well in a heat wave is because when I create my bouquets and my pop can arrangements, they are not in a controlled environment for when they're up for sale. They're in my flower wagon, which is up at the road, and while I have shade cloth on three sides, the sun still hits it all day long. It starts in the morning, it hits the back of the cart with shade. By noon, it's the side. But by the afternoon and in the evening, it's starting to go right into the flower wagon. So the dahlias that I'm using in a heat wave need to withstand high temperatures. Now, we are not going into the highs that some of the places in the States have got, which in Fahrenheit has been over 100 degrees. But we have hovered around 90 degrees for quite a long time, and we do have higher humidity because we live here on the coast of Vancouver Island, and the humidity and the heat does take its toll on quite a few flowers. So the dahlias that I used had to withstand the humidity and the heat, because as you can see in my flower wagon in this picture that I'm going to put up, it really is open to the elements. In the flower wagon, I have been putting up 2 bouquets. So they go out at approximately 10 o'clock, and hopefully they're sold before the end of the day. But my flower wagon is open until 10 p.m. So 2 bouquets need to be able to, at the most, stay out there for 10 hours and at the least get sold really fast and then just get replaced. But I never put more than 2 out at a time for that reason, so that if they do get sold early, I can go down into my bouquet making station, which you've seen in previous videos, make another one and put it up there. I'm in my office and the window is literally right there, and I can see my flower wagon through the window, so I will know when I'm working in my office whether a bouquet has sold or not. Aside from bouquets, there is also my pop can arrangements, which are either single dinner plate dahlias or 3 ball or decorative dahlias in a pop can. And they sit in a little flat of 15, and I don't put anything down the center row. So I have 5 pop cans on one side and 5 on the other, and they too have to withstand being out in that kind of heat. With all that said, let's get on to the top 10 dahlias in my cut garden that withstand a long heat wave. Now, number 10 on the list is Wizard of Oz. And I love Wizard of Oz. It's this nice, beautiful, pale pink type ball dahlia. And the reason it makes the number 10 is because of the 10 that I have chosen. It holds up just a little less than the other 9. And that doesn't mean a whole lot. It holds up really well for being out in the sun for 10 hours. It can't hold up really well being in the sun 2 days in a row for 10 hours. But that doesn't happen anyway. I just did a test of it, and is the only one of the top 10 that could not hold up for 2 days at 10 hours in the direct sun and heat of the flower wagon. However, somebody buys it and brings it inside their home, it's going to be a cooler temperature anyway, unless they have no form of way of cooling down their house, which does happen in some homes. I've worked in some homes as an interior designer who, for whatever reason, they don't put on any way of cooling the home down in the summer, and it get really hot. So that's one reason I do actually take that into account. Yeah, I mean, if your house is boiling hot in the summer, it's going to take its toll on any flowers that are in a vase as well. So that's why Wizard of Oz makes my number 10. It looks beautiful in a bouquet. If you look at this bouquet that I'm just putting up on the screen here, you can see there's 2 of them, and they're paired with a stilbe, as well as a white night sunflower, poppy pod, and there looks like a dried allium in the center of that bouquet. I can't really remember because this was made a while ago, and laurel leaves. And it just looks absolutely beautiful in a bouquet. It just doesn't have as much heat tolerance as the other 9 that I've chosen in this list. Now the 9th one in my list is Petras Wedding. The reason it makes number 9 is not that it doesn't hold up as well as the other 8. It's because when the heat really started to set in, it stopped producing as much. Now, I only planted 3 plants this year of Petras Wedding because it was so prolific last year. I figured that's all I needed this year. I mean, it produced and produced and produced. Only this year, with an almost 2-month-long heat wave, it really slowed down on its production. So I didn't have the blooms that I had last year. And that's why it makes number 9 on my list. Because although it has a really good vase life in the heat, in the garden, in the cut flower bed, it really doesn't produce as well as it does once the weather starts cooling. Looks great in a bouquet. I mean, I've got it in this bouquet. It's paired with Beautiful, which is the one lower down on the front that you can see. It's got a Lindsay Michelle in the middle there, and tucked around the back is, I believe, an AC Lumis, and an Arabian Nights is the smaller one, tucked sort of side view on the right. And then, of course, up above you see the 3 Petras Wedding, as well as some white marjoram. It really, that little ball of white, it's got thinner stems, so it creates a little bit of movement and bounces around when it's in the top of a bouquet. It really does add quite a lot of character and interest to bouquets, so I do love it. And that's why that one makes my number 9. Number 8 on my list is similar to Wizard of Oz. It's not quite as pale in its pink. It's a little stronger pink. It's also a slightly larger ball, and it withstands the heat for a much longer time. So that's why it makes my number 8, because it does just that much better than Wizard of Oz. But it, like Petras Wedding, well, actually, it's new for me this year, so I can't compare to how it produced last year. It's a new ball dahlia for me. And I can't compare to see if it has slowed down or not from production for when we're not in an extended heat wave. I'll have to wait for another year to figure that one out. But it is beautiful. And in the bouquet that I've chosen to show you, you can see how strong it stands out in a bouquet. Here it's paired with black bachelor buttons, poppy pods, some white sunflowers, and you can actually see a Wizard of Oz down low in it, so you can see that it is a much stronger pink than the Wizard of Oz. Number 7 on my list is also a ball dahlia. There are dinner plate dahlias in here. The dinner plate dahlias are my stars of the show, so the ones that are in my top 10 will be higher up in the list than the ball dahlias. But number 7 is a ball dahlia, and it's Cornell Bronze. Does great in the heat. It has that really beautiful, bold, autumnal color to it, which is why it only makes number 7 and doesn't go any higher, because it's more of an autumnal color. So when it's in the earlier summer, it isn't quite the right color choice that I would want for a bouquet, unless I'm using it as a shadow. And if I'm using it as a shadow flower, it's not a predominant flower, so it's already taking a back seat to the more important flowers that I want in the bouquet. And that's okay, because not everybody can be the star of the show. But it does mean that it doesn't have that prominence and wow for the earlier summer that I want to use in a bouquet. It's simply a supporting character, and that's why it's number 7. Now, the bouquet I'm showing it in here, that is exactly what I did. I've got my I've forgotten what the name of my hydrangeas are right now that I bought. I should know that. It's Firelight. It's got the Firelight hydrangeas in it. It's got a sweet Fabian ball dahlia above it, and I've got it lower down, acting more like a shadow, where it withdraws from the prominence of the pinks and the whites. It's more of a background color, and gives it a bit more depth to the bouquet. And that's why that Cornell Bronze makes number 7. Now, number 6 on my list of heat-tolerant dahlias is an accident. Now, I had ordered 8 tubers of tartan from my wholesale supplier. And I was a little confused why The flowers from the tartan that I got from my wholesale supplier from those tubers seem redder in tone than tartan should be. And I just put it down to an anomaly, and sometimes some just don't come across the way you expect them to look. But then as more and more of the tubers started blooming, and it was the same with all of them, I realized I didn't get tartan. They were all labeled tartan. They were all in little packages with tartan signage, etc. on them. But when I went into their catalog, I realized that every single one of the tartan tubers that they sent me was actually, let me just look at the name properly, Yara Falls. So I got 8 Yara Falls tubers instead of tartan. So they were all completely mislabeled. And that's okay. I call that a happy accident because it did well in the heat, and it does look different than all of my other red dahlias, or my purple, which is tartan. And it's got that nice two-tone effect with the white. So it actually ends up making my number 6 top 10 dahlias that can withstand a heat wave. And I found it really fun to use. So I'm actually glad that I have it, but it absolutely is not tartan. You can see it here in this bouquet. I've got it down low with a white sunflower beside it. I've got what looks like a Spartacus above it, and poppy pods, as well as marjoram in both white and purple. And the two-tone effect of it looks really, really nice. You can see in the bouquet, this one reads more purple, but it's not tartan. And you'll see what tartan looks like because it'll be higher up in my top 10 list. So number 5, we're up to number 5 on my list, is a dinner plate dahlia, Papago. I always called it Papagino, and then I got corrected. I forget who corrected me, and I'm glad they corrected me. I say a lot of things wrong, and I like it when people correct me. It takes me a while for it to sink in the proper pronunciation, but it eventually does. Papagino, I love. It has a completely different look than all of my other dinner plate dahlias, with the exception of Wanda's Aurora, which did not bloom in the heat wave at all. So Papagino, I'm probably still saying it wrong, did. And that beautiful sort of yellowy tone in it with the sort of browny, rosy shades around it, which reads a bit orangey depending on the light, was a really, really nice contrast to the colors in the rest of my top 10 dahlias that can withstand a heat wave. And I really, when it bloomed, I really enjoyed using it for that reason. It gave quite a different look to my bouquets, especially because the sunflowers, a lot of them are yellow and some of them are white. But as you can see here in this bouquet, I have paired it with white sunflowers. And even the white sunflowers look really, really beautiful with it. They almost take on that yellow cast of the Papageno, and just looks stunning in the bouquet. And then the purple of the marjoram pulls out that deep browny rosy tone that's within it as well. So really, really, really loved using Papageno during the heat wave in my bouquets. So the next dahlia on my list is number 4, and it is Labyrinth. And Labyrinth is so prolific, which is why it's right up there at number 4. It is highly prolific. And not only that, it held up really well in the heat. It's such a cool looking dahlia. A lot of flower farmers are replacing Cafe au Lait with Labyrinth because Labyrinth is so much more prolific. It is so much more reliable. It is so much more consistent in the way it looks. Cafe au Lait is a bit of a diva. It's got all sorts of issues. And as much as people love how it looks, for every really beautiful one that you get a whole bunch that just don't make the cut. But Labyrinth is consistently good looking. It's a high tuber producer. It's blooms like crazy. So it's right up. It's a top dahlia whether it's a heat wave or not, because it's such a good dinner plate dahlia to grow. Can't say enough good things about it. Now in the bouquet that I'm showing you here that I used it with, I've paired it with a white light pro-cut sunflower, purple marjoram, poppy pods, and there's laurel leaves in there, but mostly what you're seeing is the sunflower leaves in this bouquet. And you can see the frilly petals within the dahlia and the multi shades within it just adds so much of a dance to the bouquet. It's just such a beautiful bouquet. Not bouquet, flower, dinner plate dahlia. Just a beautiful one. So now we're on to number 3, and number 3 is Tartan. So you can see here, it's similar to Yara Falls and yet completely different. When you think Yara Falls is tartan, you accept that it might just be the flowers in that particular tuber that are looking a little bit different. But when all 8 of them look completely different and you go in the catalog and you realize, no, Yara Falls is deep red, where more of the tips are the white, whereas tartan, as you can see here, is deep purple. And the whites kind of flow into the center of the petals, or not center, but the length of the petals, not so much just on the tip. And it is just such a stunning dinner plate dahlia, and it held up really well in the heat. It's not a high producer in flowers. It isn't a high producer in flowers anyway, so you need more tubers of that to have a consistent supply. It's also not the greatest at tuber production, at least not for me. So I find the tuber production to be very poor. I find the flowering status of it to be less than average. It's just that it's so gorgeous. It's so beautiful. I absolutely love it. It holds up really well in the heat, and it looks really stunning in bouquets. And I'm just going to open up the bouquet that I'm going to show you within here. So here you can see it. I've got it with a gold light Pro-Cut sunflower. I've got what looks like a white light up in the top right. I've got it paired with purple marjoram, which really pairs in nicely with the deep purple of the tartan. But you can just see it there. I mean, with the white stripes through the deep purple, it's another one like Labyrinth that puts so much dance into the bouquet, adds so much depth and character and interest and visual complexity that it makes up for its low production in tubers as well as flowers. The fact that it also holds up really well in the heat is, of course, just a huge bonus. And that's my number 3 dinner plate dahlia. Number 2 is AC Lumis. AC Lumis holds up extremely well in the heat. AC Lumis was a dinner plate that was incredibly prolific for me every other year but this year. So the heat wave seems to have affected its production of flowers. It was very slow in its production of flowers. But it's just so beautiful with the white frosting on the tips and the back of the flower. And it holds up incredibly well in the heat. It's a high tuber producer. It's one that any time a flower comes up, it's like I'm excited to cut it. Well, same as the tartan and the Labyrinth. The AC Lumis adds, and again, so much visual interest to bouquets that it's just so nice to use. You can see in this bouquet, you can kind of see the side view, so you can see the back of the petals have a lot of white to it, and then just the touch on the tip. Again, that adds so much movement and interest to a bouquet. And the depth of the color means it doesn't fight with, for example, what you see here, an orange Pro-Cut sunflower. It allows the orange Pro-Cut to be the dominant color. And yet, because of its visual interest, you can't help but not stop looking at it. And paired again with the purple marjoram, which has sort of that sort of white. Is that the purple marjoram in that? I think so. It looks a little white. Maybe I've got purple and white marjoram in there, which gets that same color combination as the white and the deep magenta that's in the AC Lumis. Absolutely love that dinner plate dahlia. Whether it's a heat wave or not, I love it. It's always one of my top dahlias, as is Labyrinth, as is Tartan, as is my number 1 dahlia in a heat wave. So my number 1 dahlia in a heat wave is a dinner plate. Very prolific in the heat. Held up to the heat fantastically. Really good tuber producer. There's nothing bad about this dahlia that you can say. And it's Spartacus. Absolutely a winner in my garden. I just love it. It produced like crazy. The color, that deep red, is just beautiful. What's interesting is if you look at the bouquet, the bouquet, This bouquet that I'm showing you, it's paired with my, I think it's espresso gladiola. They're kind of the same color, so clearly I have a favorite color when it comes to flowers. That super, super deep, deep, deep red. Anyway, it looks great with the glad. It looks great with the yellow sunflowers. It looks great, realistically, with absolutely everything. There's nothing I can say negative about Spartacus. It is just, to me, a staple. It is my number one because it's prolific. It's got great tuber production, does fantastic in the heat. It's got everything. Those are my top 10 heat-loving dahlias. Next week, I'm going to do the top 10 in my garden heat-hating dahlias. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one out. So you don't miss out on that one, because if you're in a climate that has a lot of heat, those might be dahlias that you might want to avoid. I'm not going to necessarily not grow them, because where I live, dahlias bloom from late June straight through until the first killing frost, which is usually end of October, beginning of November sometime, but it can be a little earlier. In the last 6 years, we had one first killing frost October 15th. But we also had 1 year where the first killing frost wasn't until December 1st. So clearly there's a huge time period where the dahlias are not in a heat wave. So I have dahlias that aren't on this list that I'm absolutely going to grow because they're perfect for the cooler weather, which is usually in the beginning of July, not this year, but definitely the latter half of August, all of September, all of October, November. So while these 10 did great in the heat wave, and some of them will make my top 10 dahlia period, there's other dahlias that do not do well in a heat wave that are still in my top 10 dahlias because of the rest of the season. But anyway, next week is going to be the week where I talk about the dahlias that just didn't work for me in a heat wave. Did they just weren't available to use, or they just simply didn't stay alive in the heat? They just whimpered and died in the blast of heat that they were getting. Are there any dahlias on heat wave? Are there any heat waving dahlias that you grow that are not on my list? Because clearly I don't grow all the dahlias in the world. I can only talk about the ones in my garden. If you have lists of dahlias that do really well in the heat for you, put them down below. Leave them in the comments section so that others can see what other dahlias do really, really well in the heat. Not just myself, so that everybody can almost use it as a resource of heat-loving dahlias. That would be really, really great. Because if I decide to buy some additional dahlias for the garden, that could be information that would be useful to me, as well as for anybody else who wants to buy dahlias for their cut flower gardens where they are in a hotter climate, and heat is a really important factor. So yeah, so if you know anyone, if you have a list of dahlias other than the ones that I said that do well in the heat, please do leave that in the comment section below. Now, I'm going to leave up here, because I'm talking about dahlias, the bouquet making for ball dahlias, as well as bouquet making for dinner plate dahlias, in case you haven't seen those two yet. And if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up or a like, and I'll see you next week. Bye.